Part 18. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 172. Honda looked at the map on the table. In fact, their ground self-defense force had been retreating for a long time. The current front line was 10 kilometers away from Mount Fuji. Honda Shobu knew that although many people in Japan and the world are advocating the monster threat theory, there are only a few who truly regard these monsters as opponents. Those guys are just using these arguments to achieve their own goals. Become famous, get promoted, or gain monetary gain. There are no people who really take the threat of these monsters seriously. But General Honda knew clearly that in just one day of attack and defense, he understood that the army of metal monsters in front of him was not something that could be easily dealt with. What their unit is facing now is just a group of no more than 300 metal monsters. The rest of the metal monsters followed the road and disappeared into the mountains or trails. The 1,500 of them could only defend against more than 300 monsters. But even so, I still can't defend. Did you see that I don't block other monsters, I just defend this group? Can you see why? Because as soon as we withdraw, these monsters can pass through the road behind us and reach directly, Tokyo Circle. If we are these monsters invaded the Tokyo area, can you imagine what it would be like? Honda will make up for it with an even more wry smile. The big shots at the rear are still arguing, but as the commander of this battlefield, he is the one who knows the fighting power of these monsters in front of him best. These monsters are so powerful in individual combat. And they were in small groups. After leaving the range of Mount Fuji, they dispersed directly and relied on their strong individual combat effectiveness to attack towns in small groups. With them spread out like this, even if you want to use powerful weapons to destroy them in one go, you can't do it. How to fight this kind of war? Honda Shobu even thought about what would happen if Fuji, the sacred mountain in the hearts of Japanese people, continued to spray these monsters. The Japanese country is really more than just chaos. Rather, it will truly become a dire straits of life. How dare I retreat? Once I retreat, the responsibility will be too great, Honda will make up for it. Feeling helpless. But wait until he comes up with a good idea. I saw a red light, like a meteor outside that day, hitting the house directly. Boom. There was a loud noise, and then the Japanese general, who was known as the wise man, didn't even have time to come up with a good strategy. It was like being pressed under a building. The first Japanese general-level executive died. This is also the first high-ranking general of Japan to die in a war since World War II, and this is only the first day after the war with the metal monster. The whole country was shocked, which is really not enough to describe this storm. However, what is even more frightening is that these metal monsters opened the road leading to the Japanese Tokyo Circle, and finally plunged into this road, running on the road at a speed not much slower than a car. Seeing that one of the most prosperous cities on earth is about to fall under the threat of monsters. The entire Japanese country's violent machine. This war weapon, also known as the self-defense forces, but actually an army, has finally made a big move. Stand ready. The Japanese country has a lot of money, but the damage to houses, people's property, and lives caused by these monsters, in just over a day, can no longer be counted in quantity. At this time, the senior officials of the Japanese country finally faced up to these metal monsters. They took advantage of this crisis to plan their own political and economic interests. Calm down a little and start to work together to deal with this big crisis that shocked the world. However, underneath all this, there is something even more worrying. That is Mount Fuji, although it has gradually stopped erupting. However, there are still a steady stream of metal monsters appearing in the crater. This news is like a drop of cold water, draining away all the people who have confidence in the Japanese self-defense forces. It's as if a basin of cold water has been poured on my heart. 2 days have passed since Mount Fuji erupted. The number of metal monsters suddenly increased to 5,000. 5,000, this kind of metal monster with extremely terrifying fighting strength. Now the entire Japanese country can no longer sit still. Messages requesting foreign reinforcements are sent to one country after another like pieces of paper. People don't know when these nightmare monsters, which seem to come from the underground, will end. If they continue to emerge like this forever, people can't imagine it. But deep under the sea, Jia Yan, who was undergoing a transformation, could no longer distract himself from the metal monster. He seemed to be asleep, but this time he fell asleep, unlike the previous mutation process, which seemed to be a coma. This time, he was a little floating, and he vaguely enjoyed the feeling of human beings in the mother's body. He is just a mosquito. Although he was born in the water, he has not fully realized that the water flow can give him such a sense of peace of mind and comfort. There are many sounds in the world, but in the depths of the seabed, all sounds have disappeared. Troubles and pains seem to not exist in this underwater world far away from the earth and the ground. Jia Yan seemed to be sleeping but not asleep, half conscious and half asleep. He could feel that the huge shark had gnawed at the cocoon-like shell on his appearance, and he could also feel that the small fish and shrimps relied on the huge material they had condensed to thrive here. It sounds like a long time, but it hasn't actually been many days. In just a few days, Jia Yan could hear the repetition of the simplest food chain around him. Microscopic organisms devoured plankton in the sea, while small fish and shrimps devoured them. Then big fish devoured small fish, and giant fish devoured these big ones. Fish, and then the giant fish was eaten by sharks and other overlords of the sea. Jia Yan can also feel the fluctuations of water flow dozens or hundreds of meters away through the water flow. Although he is in a cocoon and cannot see the outside world clearly, his gradually condensed ears have incredible hearing. This sea water is the birthplace of life. All living things on the earth have gradually evolved into the present multifarious species through sea water. Each living creature itself has evolved over the long history of the earth. It's just a flash in the pan, just like a flash in the pan. Human beings have been civilized for only a few thousand years. Although it is known as the master of the earth, for the planet Earth itself, humans are just an ordinary species that lives on the surface of their own bodies. Who can be sure that in the long history of the existence of living things on the earth, there has never been an intelligent life similar to humans, which has ever burst out with the brilliant light of civilization? Then it disappeared in the long river of history in an unknown way, and even the traces of its existence were swallowed up by time, becoming an unsolved mystery. Therefore, the so-called master that human beings regard themselves as is just self-deception. In the history of the evolution of the earth, human beings are only a moment of glory. If something goes wrong in the future, it will just end up being lost in a long period of time. Time. It is an existence that can destroy everything. Jia Yan, who was ups and downs and in a deep sleep, seemed to have thought about a lot of great things, but also seemed to have thought about nothing. This mutation took a long time, and it seemed that the effect of the blue crystals and blue liquid was far greater than any other mutated substance. Jia Yan is still sleeping. But what he didn't know was how huge the basket he had dug was. Maybe it was a broken metal pipe, or something mysterious. Judgment is a threat. More and more metal monsters are pouring out of those metal pipes, seemingly endless. It's not just Japan. Finally, 3 days after the war broke out in Japan on Mount Fuji, metal monsters appeared on the surface. When the number suddenly reaches 10,000. The Star-Spangled Banner country has a very famous geological park. Its name is Yellowstone. This Yellowstone Park is actually a natural volcano crater. However, this huge volcano is different from Mount Fuji in Japan. It is known as a supervolcano. Supervolcano means that the volcano is really huge. Unlike a volcano like Mount Fuji, even if it erupts, it will only cause a certain range of disasters. If the Yellowstone volcano erupts, The natural disasters caused will even affect the climate of the entire Earth, triggering a series of subsequent effects that are absolutely terrifying. However, on this day, in Yellowstone Park, which had been attracting the attention of the Stars and Stripes Nation, figures slowly crawled out from the scorching underground. They have a ferocious appearance, with metal-like bodies, and an appearance that looks like flesh and blood, but is different. It is simply a replica of those metal monsters climbing out of Mount Fuji in Japan. Boom boom boom. When streaks of red light burst onto the bodies of countless tourists in Yellowstone Park, tearing them into several pieces. The most powerful country in the world, the Star-Spangled Banner, is in emergency. On this day, I don't know if it was a chain effect, but many similar scenes appeared all over the world. Some are not volcanoes, but are coming from underground caves, well-known caves, unknown caves, and even some caves that humans have not discovered. There are reports of metal monsters appearing in each of these places. Overnight, the number was as high as 50,000, just a rough count. Boom boom boom. Countless red lights exploded in the surface world that humans were proud of, tearing apart and blowing up the buildings they had spent huge amounts of money to build one by one. Metal monsters from the underworld. It is still increasing. They appear in every continent and every region. The whole world was in an uproar. The world has changed. The monster crisis, for the first time since Waxia discovered a giant monster, has become a huge disaster worldwide. And just in the days when the world is about to change. In the underwater world, the huge floating matter is still sleeping. The azure substance, W, flashes slightly on the dark material surface. Jia Yan is still sleeping. Perhaps what awaits him will be a sleep that never wakes up, or a big mosquito after waking up. Will be one step closer. How powerful it is, no one knows. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 173. The big mosquito doesn't know what kind of world he will face when he wakes up. Prosperous or run down. Have no idea. He is just concentrating on his own sleep now, and pays no attention to the things in the outside world. Time passed quickly, just as the outside world became more chaotic. In the deep sea, the mysterious substance finally changed. Jia Yan felt that his consciousness gradually became clearer. He could feel his body. Familiar, yet strange. It seems to have become extremely powerful, but because of this power, it actually has a strange feeling to the body. How much change must this have made to become like this? Jia Yan felt his body. First of all, it's that sense of power. Power is like an endless spring, emerging from the body. This sense of power is simply not comparable to before. The power in the past was, at best, an understandable feeling. Even if it was incomparable as a human, it could at least be understood. But this time when I woke up and felt my own power, it actually had that rawness to it. This feeling is not Jia Yan's illusion, but that he has lost a measure of his current power and has entered a realm that even his human soul cannot understand. As for how strong a state you have reached, you have to wait until the cocoon that wraps you is broken before you can really try and feel it. Changes in relative strength are changes in defense. The defense level of the azure substance seemed to be transmitted to the whole body, but Jia Yan felt that his appearance color had not turned into a pure azure color. Instead, it turned into a black color with a little bit of blue. Overall, most of them are dark. But this darkness is mixed with blue defense. But it won't be any worse than the complete defense before. Jia Yan feels that his current defense is definitely much better than his previous one, and it might even be stronger than when the blue substance appeared on the exoskeleton. Of course, there is probably still a certain gap between it and the crystallized blue. If you want to see specific effects, you still have to wait until you are completely out of the cocoon. The surrounding deep sea is still so quiet, but on the mysterious material condensed by Jia Yan's clot. There are also many small fish and shrimps wandering around. Finally, time came to a certain moment, and Jia Yan in the claw tissue felt an unprecedented momentum. This momentum made Jia Yan understand that it was time for him to break out of his cocoon. Then I saw the giant mosquito slowly stretching out its front legs in the pitch-black scenery in front of me. The sharp horns on the forefoot seemed to be no different from before. And just when Jia Yan stretched out his front foot, boop! The hard mysterious material in front seems to be an overinflated balloon. In the light sound, a crack appeared directly. Then, the crack quickly grew larger. Then, the cracks spread like spider webs. Jia Yanfu's eyes. Finally there was a little light, which came from the tip of the knife-shaped horns on his front feet, making the darkness in his eyes disappear quickly. Then Jia Yan only saw that the crack in front continued to expand, and then a little impurity peeled off from the crack, and then more and more impurities fell out. Hua hua hua. A seawater under high pressure seemed to have finally found a pouring opening, and quickly poured in through the gap created by the crack. The cracks became bigger and bigger, and not long after, the world in front of Jia Yan finally became completely bright. The outside world is hundreds of meters deep seawater, and the high-pressure seawater immediately fills the entire space with heavy seawater. The pressure of hundreds of meters deep sea suddenly suppressed Jia Yan's entire body. However, seawater hundreds of meters deep is not a very dangerous pressure for Jia Yan. After all, the defensive power of his body was already at the monster level before he mutated. Has it undergone mutation now? The pressure of hundreds of meters of seawater is really not a threat. On the contrary, the depth of the seawater and the oxygen-free environment surrounded by seawater may be even more dangerous. Jia Yan was a little nervous at this time. In his previous state, he was hiding in the material condensed by the clot. Although it seems that he has been in a state of almost not breathing, that is not considered holding his breath after all, and now that the seawater is pouring in, it is really impossible to breathe. Jia Yan was afraid that he would be like other mosquitoes. The larvae should be able to survive in water, but after turning into mosquitoes, they would not be able to survive. It has been proven before that he can swim, but at that time it was only a short-term swimming, but now he can directly swim in the deep sea without getting a trace of oxygen, which makes him not nervous. Goo 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 goo. The sound of sea water pouring into the mysterious substance of the clot is very clear. Then Jia Yan only felt that his body reacted to the sea water at this moment. A kind of blue appears on the surface of its body. This thing that appears seems to have the ability to decompose sea water, causing bubbles to appear all around. Jia Yan felt that with the appearance of these bubbles, his respiratory organs felt like they were receiving oxygen. The oxygen concentration is extremely high. Jia Yan's body was immediately filled with power. The giant mosquito smiled in his heart. Jia Yan was wondering whether this was because he mutated in the sea water, and his mutated biological instinct gave him the ability to breathe in the water. Or is this some kind of effect of azure crystals and azure liquid? The problem is unsolvable. After all, Jia Yan doesn't even know what the blue crystals and semi-solids are. Thinking about it now is really unrealistic. The pressure of the sea water has become completely ineffective because of the super strong body of the big mosquito. The pressure of hundreds of meters of sea water is actually very terrifying if it is a machine made by humans. Even if it's a car, they will all be squashed at this time. But these pressures are heavy on Jia Yan. It seems that it only makes the body feel slightly uncomfortable, but has no effect anymore. A slender creature's front legs stretched out from the broken material. The surrounding fish and shrimp seemed to be frightened, and they quickly retreated into the distance one by one. Then, the creature stretched out its legs one by one, and finally, its entire body was revealed in the sea water. In the depths of the sea, except for animals like giant fish and octopuses, there is no such huge creature at all. And the appearance of this creature is not similar to any of those giant creatures. Horrible, with a crazy and ferocious meaning. It seemed that the strongest man in the world came to the seabed to rule these weak creatures. He has 6 slender legs. These legs are extremely slender, each one is twice as long as the main body. The shortest front foot is 6 meters long. But this shortest front foot is even more frightening. Because its tip part, above the foot, has extremely sharp knife-shaped horns. This knife-shaped horn looks like a real steel blade, and the length of the knife at this time reached more than 30 centimeters. The edge of the blade is gleaming, as if it is a top-notch sword that has been tempered thousands of times. Compared with its feet, the body of this huge creature does not appear to be that huge, but it is still the kind of top powerhouse deep in the seabed. The body of the giant mosquito at this time is already 2.5 meters long. A kind of exoskeleton armor with a light black color and azure color is draped on his body. The overall feeling is that of an indestructible top-notch one. Defense. His faintly shining compound eyes were constantly looking at the outside world, as if countless worlds were reflected in those countless small eyes, which was extremely mysterious. There are slender wings on both sides of his body, but the state of these wings is no longer what it used to be. The wings are each about 2 meters long, and they are draped entirely on the surface of the body, just like a warrior who is ready to go and can't wait to explode. Just by looking at its appearance, you can tell that this pair of wings has an astonishing flying speed. And on the surface of the entire wing veins, there are pieces of azure blue scales that don't know when. This azure blue is really very beautiful, but those who really know the effect of azure substances on giant mosquitoes will definitely be surprised. The defense of these wings is absolutely amazing. What's more, the actual function of the azure substance that is completely displayed in the body of the giant mosquito. In addition to amazing defense, what other functions it has is beyond anyone's ability to guess. Even Jia Yan is now very curious. What effect will these blue substances have now? And at this moment, this big mosquito that should belong to the sky finally swam out of the mysterious material. It is 2.5 meters long, but with the 6 spread out legs, the deep sea area occupied by the entire giant mosquito actually reaches a terrifying 10 meters wide. The giant mosquito at this time is the real giant mosquito. Super huge mosquito. Jia Yan looked at his body with satisfaction. The super huge body made him feel incredibly powerful and confident. Haha, it's so comfortable. With this kind of power and this kind of defense, even if another fighter plane comes over, even if there are any more air-to-air missiles, I won't be afraid at all. Jia Yan still doesn't know how powerful he is now, but just by feeling his body like this, he knows that he has really become stronger, not even a little bit stronger. Perhaps the improvement this time is the biggest since he was reborn as a mosquito in so long. In the distant sea water, a sharp and cold sight looked at this huge mosquito that seemed to be reborn from the ashes. This is the same 6-gill shark that once learned a lesson under the clotted substance that enveloped the giant mosquito. This shark may be inhabiting the nearby waters. As a result, I smelled the fresh smell of flesh and blood this time, so I rushed over immediately. The newly born giant mosquitoes exude an alluring smell. This smell is simply an irresistible temptation for carnivorous sharks. So here it comes. Huh? Isn't this the shark that wanted to eat me before? Although I didn't see its appearance, I remembered its thermal energy. It turns out he is a 6-gill shark. No wonder he is so ferocious. He is simply one of the largest carnivorous overlords in the deep sea. At the same time, Jia Yan saw a 3-meter-5-meter shark not far away. While he was watching the shark, the 6-gill shark opposite suddenly moved, attacking towards Jia Yan. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 174. I didn't bother you, and you brought it to your door yourself. Jia Yan's compound eyes flickered, staring at the huge shark charging towards him. Now that he can breathe in water, his most fatal disadvantages have been eliminated. What else is there to be afraid of? A truly terrifying monster. Jia Yan had some leisure time and was looking at the approaching big shark with his compound eyes that were emitting a faint luster. The battle between a six-gill shark, the overlord of the deep sea, and the giant mosquito, the overlord of the air, is about to begin. Sharks are extremely fast. In fact, this is just a six-gill shark that has not yet fully grown up. He is still too young to know how terrifying the creature in front of him is. And his elders who are more than 5 meters long may have seen such a terrifying one. The huge monster is already fearful and may even retreat on its own initiative. This monster is no longer comparable to ordinary creatures. Jia Yan had a cold light in his compound eyes. He didn't make any move, just waiting for the arrival of this huge six-gill shark in the sea area where he was. He didn't let him wait long, because the six-gill shark couldn't stand the delicious aroma that the big mosquito kept emitting, and finally hit him head-on. At the same time, its mouth was wide open, and the sharp teeth that had been lost in its mouth had grown back. Sharks are creatures that constantly replace their teeth throughout their lives. It is not surprising that they can regrow their teeth within a few days. The new teeth of this six-gill shark are naturally as shiny as new, and their sharpness is far beyond what the old teeth can compare with. And right in front of this bloody mouth, there is a huge monster that is not afraid of anything. It is looking at it with its pair of compound eyes. This monster does not have the fish scales that those undersea creatures have, but it has a pair of wings that can only be possessed by flying creatures in the air. This scene is very inconsistent. It seems that such a creature should not appear in this deep sea. But the Phaeton monster happened to appear. And in this deep sea, there is also a duel with the shark, the overlord of the deep sea. The six-gill shark has a ferocious appearance and narrow fish eyes. The cruel light grew stronger, and it had already rushed to the body of the giant mosquito monster. The open mouth is about to bite the giant mosquito's body. It's really too slow. At this moment, this huge mosquito, which was about to be in danger, sighed in his heart. I thought I was about to catch the huge six-gill shark. Suddenly, he felt a dark shadow swaying rapidly near his body. This shadow is too fast. It's so fast that the six-gill shark can't even react. Poof! A faint smell of blood emitted from the sea. It turned out to be a giant mosquito monster with a knife-shaped horny forefoot, which penetrated the body of the six-gill shark at the speed of lightning. The whole knife-shaped horn is shining with azure luster, and its sharpness is no longer comparable to ordinary ones. With just one stab, the entire body of the six-gill shark was pierced. This time, it was like a rabbit rising and a falcon falling. The knife-shaped horn was as fast as lightning. It was not at the speed that the six-gill shark could react, and before the six-gill shark had time to feel the pain, the body that rushed forward had already been stabbed on the slender knife-shaped horn. The next moment, the instinct of the creature caused this huge carnivorous creature on the sea floor to twitch rapidly. It used it in fear. All the strength, struggling with all my strength. The ferocious color in the six-gill shark's eyes still showed no sign of retreat. This cold-blooded creature didn't even know how to write the words retreat and fear. It just struggled and kept opening its mouth full of sharp teeth. He kept biting the enemies he couldn't reach in the sea water. Too weak, too weak, too weak. Jia Yan looked at the shark that penetrated one of his front feet. No matter how hard the shark struggled, he could not feel any uncontrollable force coming from it. This power is like the strength of a child. No threat at all. Later, he looked into the eyes of the six-gill shark that gradually learned to be a little afraid. Slowly approach your mouth parts. Just as the big mosquito's mouth parts approached, the six-gill shark's sharp teeth suddenly bit it down. A faint light flashed in the giant mosquito's compound eyes, and then he ignored it and allowed the six-gill shark to bite his mouth parts. Click. The sharp teeth bit down, and in no time, he hit the mouthparts of the giant mosquito. Lightning attack speed. This six-gill shark is indeed a carnivorous overlord in the deep sea, and its attack capabilities are extremely terrifying. But the next moment, the new sharp teeth that bit the dark monster's mouthparts showed no resistance at all, and were directly broken and damaged. A giant mosquito exoskeleton that can withstand even combat golden aerial cannons. Is it possible that this six-gill shark can bite through existence? If it dares to bite Jia Yan's body, the fate of the six-gill shark is destined. Then, the mouthparts penetrated into the body of the six-gill shark without the opponent being able to resist it at all. Well, there is still blood to be sucked, but the taste of this blood is not very delicious. Maybe it's because I have lost interest in any blood now. Jia Yan gently sucked the six-gill shark's body of blood. Under its huge suction, the six-gill shark quickly shrank. Most of the substances in the body of marine organisms are composed of water, but except for blood, the substances composed of these water are not so easy to be sucked out. But the violent power of the giant mosquito directly sucked all the water in the six-gill shark's body, sucking it like crazy. Not long after, Jia Yan's front feet shook slightly. A six-gill shark with a shabby body that seemed to be only half its original weight fell lightly into the depths of the ocean. Compared with the previous six-gill shark, this fallen wreckage. He had lost his voice a long time ago. Not only the blood, but also other substances in the body seemed to have been sucked clean by the giant mosquito. Jia Yan's compound eyes looked at the huge shark slowly falling to the bottom of the sea, and the sparkle in his eyes seemed to become more intense. Halfway through the intake, I actually felt a little comfortable. It seems that what I was sucking was not only blood, but also other substances in the shark's body. But it feels good. My strength has been replenished to a certain extent, and it's very comfortable. Jia Yan's compound eyes brightened even more. Jia Yan has not moved his body since he emerged from the mysterious substance formed by the clot. Now, he looks at the gray sea water above his head. The body finally moved. Regardless of whether he can survive in sea water or not, he still belongs to the sky. So, Jia Yan is leaving here. The 6 super powerful giant mosquitoes moved with their long legs. Then, /U0026 NBS. Jia Yan looked at his 6 long legs. These 6 long legs are very strong and are constantly waving in the sea water. The extremely high pressure of the deep sea water caused countless bubbles to appear. However, even though he was paddling so fast, his body did not move forward at all. Jia Yan's eyes widened and he realized that he couldn't swim. Kind of funny. Such a powerful giant mosquito is trapped in the water. Don't worry, the power of these 6 legs is absolutely enough. Although my body weight has become very heavy now, it is the body of a flying creature after all, and its weight should not be exaggerated. Even if it is not floating now, it is instead of sinking. If you master a little bit of technique, it shouldn't be difficult to float up. Jia Yan thinks. When I was dodging the silent fighter before, it didn't seem so difficult to dive by myself, but this time, it was actually extremely difficult to even move. This must be because we are in a depth of several hundred meters. The pressure here is too great, so it is quite difficult to swim. The super powerful giant mosquito is a bit embarrassing. He had just become so powerful and yet he was still unable to swim. This is just a bit embarrassing. Then I saw a big monster floating in the deep sea, with 6 legs that were more than 6 meters long. Continuously waving wildly. One moment forward, the other moment backward. In short, I just can't make progress well. While the wings were swimming, Jia Yan's eyes lit up. Then he spread his wings. Poof. Goo 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 goo. Countless blisters popped up. The spread wings finally calmed down the randomly flowing water around the giant mosquito. The body that could not maintain balance in the sea water finally regained its balance. Haha, it's true. Look at me flying in the sea. Jia Yan felt the feeling of wings. Then I waved my wings excitedly. The huge pressure of the deep sea that seemed to condense the body could not withstand Jia Yan's powerful wings muscles. This pair of huge and powerful wings flapped slowly. His body is getting faster and faster, swimming more and more upwards. I fly. Hua hua hua. Finally, the flapping wings of the giant mosquito exerted great power. His swimming upward also became incredibly fast. Even if the body is not the kind of fish that conforms to the dynamics in the water, many biological structures are even blocking the flow of water. However, relying on violence, the huge body of the giant mosquito is still far superior to most marine life, and it swims upward quickly with a snorkeling speed of about 100 kilometers per hour. Quick. Really fast. Plus his weird ability to breathe in water. Since then, this giant mosquito monster that has almost dominated the sky can also claim to be a strong man in the ocean. The sea level above is getting closer and closer. The sea water pressure on the body is getting lighter and lighter. Finally, this terrifying giant monster approached the sea at an incredible speed. If someone looks down from the air, you can see a huge dark creature. This creature has 6 long legs that are spread out randomly like dry branches. The long legs are slender and full of power, especially the knife-shaped horns in the pair of front feet. Look for it. Shuyuan, this horn has a sharp blade that reflects the azure light. It's hard to believe how powerful it is in attack. But it only took a moment to see the vague shadow of this monster in the deep sea. In the blink of an eye, this monster came to the surface of the sea like lightning. Immediately afterwards, any witness will think that this is just a monster of deep sea creatures, and finally when it comes to the sea level. Wow! A huge body rising into the sky. Boom 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 boom. The sea water seemed to have surged with a tsunami. Amidst the roaring sea water, a dark and huge body spread its wings and flew into the sky with all its strength. I hope everyone will subscribe to the original version and there will be no anti-piracy chapters in the future. Bulletin is deeply sorry that the chapter just now caused certain reading difficulties for genuine subscribers. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 175. Book friends who like this book, please subscribe to the official version, thank you. Yin yin yin. Whistle, roar, roar. The wildly waving wings reached an extremely violent flapping speed in an instant. Whistle, roar, roar. The noise, comparable to the flying speed of a fighter jet, resounded for several kilometers. The huge sea creature actually flew into the air in an instant. He has a majestic appearance, faintly twinkling compound eyes, and the most terrifying 6 powerful long legs. His mouth parts are slender and hard, and there still seems to be some blood dripping down slowly. Howl! The wings of the big mosquito were flapping vigorously. This was the declaration of return of this flying monster that terrified the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force when it returned to the sky. I'm back. Become stronger and stronger. Come on if you have the guts. Xiao xiao. The giant mosquito looked at the blue sky and white clouds above his head and the intoxicating breeze blowing around him, feeling relaxed and happy. Fee-fi. Boom boom boom. The big mosquito flies in the sky, as if it is covered with stars and the moon, with a speed like a shooting star, which is extremely fast. As soon as he jumped, he arrived at an altitude of 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters used to be my limit, but now, my limit is far from here, Jia Yan said perfunctorily, looking at the sky above, higher places, waiting for Jia Yan to conquer. Now he is the one who has just been reborn. He is not as much as expected at all, he just wants to vent. Crazy catharsis. Look, how powerful the giant mosquito that was resurrected from the depths of the ocean is. Jia Yan's compound eyes shine even brighter, and he is flying higher into the sky. Whistle, roar, roar. The violent roar of flapping wings resounded through the sky. Boom boom boom. My ears were filled with the sound of the strong wind. This sound was so pleasant, it seemed to be a reflection of Jia Yan's current mood. Roar. Roar. Roar again. The giant mosquito is still flying upward. At the same time, this scene happened on the coast. It has been directly observed by the Japanese early warning radar. Always a huge creature. The size is even more than 2 or 3 meters. If it were changed to the old Japanese country, this would definitely be a huge news topic, and it might even cause a sensation in the entire world. But today, this wonderful large biological reaction appeared on the Japanese early warning radar. No one in the entire surveillance radar station was surprised. Don't get me wrong, the radar station is still working normally. But the atmosphere here is definitely full of weirdness and lifelessness. There is an abnormality in the radar monitoring. The altitude is 1000, 1003, 1005, and still rising. Suddenly there was a person working in front of the screen. The strange data in the surveillance was quickly revealed. But after this person reported the data, he continued his other work. The rest of the people just looked at the screen and stopped paying attention one by one. The reaction of this monitoring station is not that it ceases to be responsible. However, at this time, the Japanese country was already riddled with holes and had no military strength left to observe and deal with any abnormal things. In fact, it was already a week after the eruption of Mount Fuji. At this time, the Japanese country was extremely difficult. The war was not going well, and the domestic high-level shirk of responsibility caused the orders to be inaccurate. As a result, the metal monsters were not dealt with. The war was even more unsatisfactory. The military and civilian casualties were huge. However, Jia Yan doesn't care about this anymore. It's okay if those annoying fighters don't come out. If they do, he still wants to teach the other party some lessons and repay the pain the other party has given him during this period. The giant mosquito is still flying high into the sky. Howl! The huge mosquito has a pair of blue wings. When the wings fly, they are radiant and refract a faint brilliance when flapping, which is very beautiful. It has been dark since birth and has never been a good-looking big mosquito. For the first time, it has a place that may be called beautiful. I don't know if the big mosquito will feel good. Jia Yan is indeed in a good mood now. But this good mood is not because the wings have become more beautiful. In fact, he has no intention to care about such small changes. What makes him happy is that his flying ability has improved. The height is here, 1,900 meters. But this is not the limit. The surrounding air has become very cold. If it were the big mosquito in the past, it would have been stiff in its movements due to the cold. But Jia Yan still has no reaction until now. The temperature here is indeed cold, and the temperature in the Japanese country may have dropped faster in recent days. Probably close to 2,000 meters here, the temperature is as low as -5 or 6 degrees. But the big mosquito still didn't react at all, and Jia Yan couldn't even feel the change in temperature. By the way, when I was at the bottom of the sea, although it was not very cold at a depth of several hundred meters, it was at least hovering around zero. It is probably during evolution that creatures instinctively feel the threat of temperature, so I was asked to keep the temperature high. The resistance has also been improved. The big mosquito's compound eyes were faint, and he immediately analyzed the reason for his current low temperature resistance. Xiao xiao. His altitude is still increasing. Finally, the height exceeded 2,000. Very good. There is no reaction yet. Sure enough, after the mutation, the enhancement is very large. Jia Yan is still controlling his body to climb upward. 2005. Jia Yan's compound eyes brightened even more. 2009. Jia Yanfu's eyes were filled with surprise. 3002. The joy in Jia Yanfu's eyes almost turned into reality. 3009. The joy in Jia Yanfu's eyes had almost turned into substance, and it was already turning towards ecstasy. 4005. The surroundings were already extremely cold, and some tiny particles of ice crystals were condensing around them. The big mosquito began to feel the slight coldness. Jia Yanfu's eyes flickered with light. After thinking for a long time, Jia Yan gave up the idea of continuing to rise. Forget it, the coldness I feel here is beyond my expectation. It's not impossible to continue ascending, but the Japanese people below don't know if there are already fighter planes waiting for them. Flying up again will probably have an impact on my combat effectiveness. Let's talk about it next time. The big mosquito finally flew downward. Although this high-altitude flight did not reach the limit. But Jia Yan has been able to roughly estimate his limit flying altitude. Approximate number. It would be between 5,500 and 6,500 meters. If it were any higher, his body functions would probably not be able to withstand the cold and would become stiff. Of course, this number is only an approximate calculation. Jia Yan made his estimate based on the current physical sensation, and he was within this estimate. I have the biggest question. That's the blue substance in his current body. When Jia Yan flies, these blue substances will always appear for a moment as he flies, and then disappear quickly. Jia Yan was thinking. If he explodes with strength, these azure substances can spread throughout his body. How much will it improve the strength? Then what level will the flight altitude reach at that time? 7,000 meters is a bit conservative, so, 8,000 meters. Even 9,000 meters. You can't fly to an altitude of 10,000 meters. That's the altitude at which most airliners fly. Jia Yan was startled by his own thoughts and forced this unrealistic idea out of his mind. After all, it's 10,000 meters. The oxygen and temperature in the sky were more than twice as high as the more than 4,000 meters he had just flown. They are all different. Even if he believed in the improvement of his strength brought by the azure substance, he still couldn't imagine that he could gallop so high in the air. Up to now, I only know that the azure matter exists in the body, and I can't activate them at all. But when I flapped my wings hard just now, some azure matter slowly appeared in the body. Could this be the activation of the azure matter? Way. During Jia Yan's descent, he tried to flap his wings, but suddenly a huge force burst out. This power is not Jia Yan's strongest power now, but the muscles of his wings seemed to be filled with a blue color instantly. After that, his flying speed seemed to have exceeded some kind of limit. Boom. This is a sonic boom. Jia Yan felt that after the muscles that controlled his wings were exerted by him, the color of that blue substance seemed to emerge, and his flying speed actually increased explosively in an instant. For a moment, Jia Yan felt an incredible gravity pulling him backwards. The sudden burst of speed made him feel a force dozens of times his body weight. If this kind of acceleration were experienced by a human being, the person might die immediately because the blood is squeezed, and all the blood vessels will burst. Only the physique of an astronaut, coupled with a series of protective measures, can withstand such a huge acceleration force. Just when Jia Yan exploded with speed and wanted to see if his guess about the blue substance was correct. At this speed, a scene that Jia Yan could not even imagine appeared. Bang! A loud voice sounded. A circle-like thing appeared near Jia Yan's compound eye. Jia Yan only saw it for an instant, and then the circle-shaped smoke formed a ring from near his body, and then quickly dissipated in the air. This is a sonic boom. So, I have exceeded the speed of sound now. How is it possible? Jia Yanfu's eyes were full of disbelief. To break through the speed of sound, the speed must reach about 1002 km per hour to exceed the speed of sound. If an individual exceeds the speed of sound, the sound must be very violent. At the same time, under certain weather conditions, the water vapor in the surrounding air will be compressed. Let the sonic boom cloud appear in the air. A few days ago, Jia Yan started to mutate and used the power of the mutation to start an air battle with 2 fighter jets. At that time, his ultimate speed reached 850 kilometers. Although it was already extremely fast, it was still far away from breaking the speed of sound. 1,200 kilometers is still far away. But I didn't expect that after completing the mutation this time, I would directly break through. And he felt that his wings did not exert much force, but reached the current speed very easily. I was just trying to see if I could induce the azure substance. Unexpectedly, I accidentally broke the speed of sound. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 176. If it were flying at full speed, how fast it would be. This. Jia Yan was shocked. Of course he knows that breaking through the speed of sound may not be that fast for ordinary fighter jets. After all, the theoretical limit speed of the F-15J he dealt with a few days ago reached 2,700 km per hour. Compared to this terrifying speed, the speed of 1,200 km per hour is completely different. But Jia Yan is not the fastest now either. Jia Yan could even feel that he could barely maintain this speed and maintain a cruising flight for at least half an hour. You must know that normal aircraft fly at close to the speed of sound, such as 900 km per hour. It is not that they cannot fly so fast, but that after breaking through the speed of sound, the fuel consumption, damage, etc. will be greatly increased. So even though most aircraft can exceed the speed of sound, and even fourth-generation fighters like the F-15J can exceed the speed of sound by more than twice, their usual cruising speed is only about 1,000 kilometers. Jia Yan uses his own strength. As long as he has strength, he does not worry about the so-called fuel consumption issue. This is another advantage I have. I just don't know how fast my ultimate flying speed is. Thinking of this, Jia Yan increased his flying speed. What Jia Yan didn't notice was that when he continued to exert force, the wing flapping muscles on the ventral side suddenly became a faint blue color. Whistle, roar, roar. The wings of the giant mosquito vibrated even more violently, and the noise it made was very similar to that of a jet aircraft, resounding throughout the sky and shaking the surrounding areas. Boom boom boom. The mosquito's body, which had already exceeded the speed of sound, speeded up again. And the degree of speed increase this time is also not small. Jia Yan only felt that the scenery around his body was retreating crazily. At this time, he was still flying more than 2,000 meters in the air. He only felt that this high altitude was the place to really fly. Such a soothing view. There is also the fresh air of the earth and the empty scenery in all directions. This kind of grand and heroic flying method is what he really wants. After the speed increases to exceed the speed of sound, the Japanese land behind them is retreating rapidly. Jia Yan couldn't estimate his own speed. All I know is that it is much faster than the previous breakthrough of the speed of sound. Hoo ho ho. Jia Yan discovered that the sound had already been thrown behind before it formed in the tentacle ears. I should be making a lot of noise, but I can't hear much. It's like entering a silent world. The air around me has that cold feeling. After all, the speed at this time is too fast. The fierce cold wind made Jia Yan feel colder than when he was at an altitude of 4,500 meters. Oh, it's still temperature control. I actually feel that the speed can be improved some more. Jia Yan felt helpless and then controlled his body. Allow yourself to gradually slow down. In the process of slowing down, he experienced a feeling, that is, there was no sound on his side. Suddenly there were more sounds. These sounds were the sounds made by his vibrating wings, which were very violent. Then Jia Yan finally dropped below the speed of sound. He twisted his wing muscles and turned into a gliding, silently flying away into the distance. Goodbye, Japan. The work here has been completed. Although I haven't seen your so-called divine objects, my goal has been achieved. Let's study the divine objects and the divine objects in the underground world of China next time. Jia Yan's compound eyes were dim and he turned his head to look at the land behind him. This Japanese country has experienced a lot, including killing members of the self-defense forces and destroying 2 Japanese fighter planes. Of course, what Jia Yan didn't know was that his greatest achievement was indirectly detonating Mount Fuji. The metal monsters released then are still wreaking havoc on the land of Japan. For unknown reasons, these monsters have even spread across the world, but Jia Yan still hasn't seen them yet. The big mosquito flew away. Of course, his figure was also revealed on the Japanese early warning radar. This mysterious object has left. The speed is decreasing and it is only about 370 kilometers away. The staff of the early warning radar station breathed a long sigh of relief. If this mysterious thing continued to penetrate into the Japanese land, he would have to report it to the superiors. Then fighter planes would definitely be sent to intercept or launch missiles or anti-aircraft guns to intercept. After all, this thing, judging from its speed and size, is not an ordinary thing. If it is really a threatening weapon, it must be intercepted and defended. But now this thing did not continue to advance towards the land of Japan, but made a strange U-turn in the air. First it broke the speed of sound, and even reached an extremely fast speed of about 1,800 kilometers, and then slowed down, until it was about 400 kilometers now. 1,800 kilometers per hour. What exactly is this? Fortunately, this thing gradually flew away from the range of Wagyu Island. Now they can breathe a sigh of relief. The internal war in the Japanese country has reached a very fierce level. The entire country, with Mount Fuji as the center, has almost entered a state of scorched earth. If something else comes to Japan at this time, they really don't have the heart to deal with it. That's right. In just 1 week, the Japanese country suffered huge losses from those metal monsters. I don't even know if it's because this place was the first place in the world to detonate metal monsters. At this time, the number of metal monsters in the Japanese country has exceeded 300,000. A metal monster worth 300,000 yuan, which is invulnerable and has extremely powerful attack power. Even if these monsters will shut down due to too many attacks, losing energy, but if a metal monster does not continue to attack, there is no telling how long the energy can last. Except for these metal monsters that were unable to move due to excessive attacks, there were very few metal monsters that were destroyed by Japan's military strength. Probably the entire self-defense force plus the metal monsters that were eliminated by civilians in various ways totaled no more than 1,000 units. It is estimated that there are more than 10,000 metal monsters that are unable to move due to the loss of energy. Combined with those destroyed by the Japanese, the combat effectiveness of the metal monsters is only 1/30. There are still a full 290,000 metal monsters waiting for the Japanese to destroy them. But in fact, facing these 300,000 metal monsters roaming in groups across the mountains and plains, can they destroy them? Enough. Of course, people in the Japanese country don't know that the strange creature shown on the radar is the giant mosquito monster that caused a huge impact in the Japanese country a week ago. Although the sensation at that time seems to be just an appetizer for the current army of metal monsters, as a very hot topic at the time, many people still remember this giant mosquito. Some people even believe that the beginning of everything was because of the appearance of this giant mosquito monster. Therefore, this giant mosquito monster should be named the beginning by the Japanese people. Of course, this is just what the Japanese people said privately. They have no idea that the word beginning they are talking about really matches Jia Yan, because most of the reason for the current chaos in the Japanese country is because of this bird. It was caused by the giant mosquito monster that detonated Mount Fuji. From this point of view, It can almost be said that even the wars in the entire world are due to this giant mosquito monster. Of course, Jia Yan himself is still unaware of the sudden changes in the world. Of course, even if he knew, he wouldn't think his fault was that big. He just damaged the metal pipe and then killed a metal monster that was chasing him. He didn't think it was a big mistake, and he didn't expect that it would cause a shocking change in the entire world. Who knew those metal monsters were so vindictive that they would launch such a large-scale attack just to kill one of their kind? Of course, perhaps hidden under all the superficial signs, there are other reasons inside. It is just a guess. Who knows the real reason? The giant mosquito is still flying. Hoo ho ho. Switching to gliding flight, Jia Yan found that even in this passive flying mode, his speed increased. It seems that after the mutation, the shape of the body is more in line with aerodynamics, and his wings are larger, and his strength has increased by an unknown amount. As long as the speed drops a little force can continue the falling speed. Lift up. I couldn't estimate how fast it was just now, but I can probably estimate the current speed, maybe around 400 km per hour. Jia Yan guessed at the speed of his sustained flight while flying. This speed is twice as fast as his previous sustained flight. This is the endurance and the most labor-saving way of flying. Jia Yan can feel that if he is willing to spend a little more effort, the endurance speed can be increased, even to the endurance flight speed of 550 km per hour. But now, because it is the most labor-saving way of flying, he feels that even if he is asked to fly around the Earth in this flying mode, he can probably do it. And because this way of flying is really not very tiring and does not consume much energy, for him now, maybe you can fly around the world and replenish energy without eating. In other words, the endurance of Jia Yan's big mosquito is enough to support him to circle the Earth without needing to rest or eat on the way. It's an incredible miracle. Of course, Jia Yan was already a monster giant mosquito, but now he has mutated and become so powerful, which is very normal. Okay, let's go to the island where I hide my notebook. Finally, after a period of flight, Jia Yan arrived at the island where the laptop bag was originally hidden. This island is very remote, and originally there were only a few families. But when Jia Yan flew to the island, he immediately saw that there seemed to be a lot more Japanese people on the island. These are the people who came here to avoid the metal monsters on the Japanese island. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 177. What happened? Of course Jia Yan didn't understand the real reason why these Japanese people gathered on this island. He just hovered strangely high above the island for a while, and then landed downwards. The notebook is quite useful, and Jia Yan feels that he can't give it up. Besides, Jia Yan is not too scared even if his figure is discovered now. The worst possible outcome is another fight with Japanese fighter planes. Now, it can be said that he has no scruples. Even if you can't beat him, you run into the sea and you chase him. He can already breathe in the water. Once he jumps into the sea, he looks like a real fish and can even dive into the deep sea. When the time comes, you can dive into the sea hundreds of meters deep, or even deeper. Do you have the ability to chase me? In addition, the instantaneous explosive power exceeds the flying speed of a fighter plane. After the mutation, the flexibility is greatly enhanced. With so much confidence, even though Jia Yan's current flying speed has not reached the limit of advanced human fighter aircraft, he is really fearless. Nuclear bomb? If he is willing to use the environment and huge lethality to kill him, Jia Yan really wants to try to see if he can withstand the attack of a nuclear bomb now. How would it feel to be shot by the most powerful weapon of mankind? Of course, this was just a momentary thought in Jia Yan's mind. He had no plans to commit suicide yet. Resisting the nuclear bomb is just a passionate thought in his heart. He has no idea of looking for a nuclear bomb to collide with him now. Jia Yan's heart was filled with pride and he landed downwards. What is in the sky? Big mosquito. Giant mosquito monster. As Jia Yan descended, he heard many Japanese people below who saw his figure shouting nervously. These people are no longer the Japanese people who were very curious about mysterious things a week ago. Now they are all very afraid of monsters. Some people have even been threatened by metal monsters in the Japanese mainland and survived a narrow escape. Escape. Now, on this paradise-like trail, they actually encounter monsters. These people are almost going to collapse. Jia Yan felt a little strange when he saw the attitude of these Japanese people. But I didn't think too much about it. His figure is still declining. There are now at least more than 100 people on this small island. These people rushed out of their homes one by one and looked at the giant mosquito monster that descended from the sky with a strong wind. This is a giant mosquito even bigger than the giant mosquito in the Battle of the Gulf. I didn't expect that there are mosquitoes even bigger than that giant mosquito in the world. What kind of monsters are these? Some people immediately recognized Jia Yan's true identity, and it was none other than the man who ruled the Japanese country. The giant mosquito monster that even appeared in front of the TV, is the same kind. No matter how imaginative they are, no one would think of this monster giant mosquito. It will be the one I saw on TV a week ago. After all, the body size of the two sides is really different, Jia Yan before. Although it is also known as a giant mosquito, it is still huge compared to ordinary mosquitoes, but right now he is. The body itself is 2.5 meters long, and its wingspan is more than 4 meters. The slender 6 legs stretched out, covering a terrifying range of more than 10 meters. From the perspective of humans or other creatures, this thing is a huge monster. It definitely has nothing to do with the giant mosquito monster from before. If it really was that giant mosquito and it had grown to this point in just a few days, it would be terrible. The giant mosquito landed in the woods on the island with a roaring wind. You young people, go and take a look. If you are discovered, you can escape with your speed. You old people should go and take a look. We young people are the future. If you want to die, don't drag us to death. The Japanese people excused themselves one by one. But just when they were still trying to shirk the blame, an overwhelming black figure rises into the sky. The giant mosquitoes are flying again. He looked deeply at the Japanese people below. A pair of compound eyes reflected the sunlight, making them look faint and forbidding. The violent wind caused by the flapping of the wings made people almost unsteady. Several 5- and 6-year-old children kept retreating in the strong wind, and 2 of them burst into tears on the spot. These Japanese people couldn't care less about this crying child. The crisis in front of them was too great. They were all nervous, fearing that the big mosquito flying above their heads would attack. A huge monster with a body size of more than 2.5 meters. This monster may even be the same one that fights the police and self-defense forces, and is an existence that can defend against bullets. This can't help but make everyone on the island worry and fear. Each of these people deliberately put on a ferocious expression and roared at the big mosquitoes in the sky. Maybe you think that this way you can scare away the big mosquitoes with the power of your voice. But how could Jia Yan be an ordinary creature that could be scared away so easily? He actually had no intention of scaring these humans. After all, at his level of power, he no longer needed to intimidate to gain momentum. If he wanted to kill, just kill them directly. Jia Yan didn't want to kill people casually. He just flew above the heads of these humans. At this time, he really felt strange. It is very strange for Japanese people to gather on this small island where birds do not lay eggs. In addition, coupled with their attitude, although it is not obvious yet, Jia Yan always feels a little strange. Also, the Japanese self-defense force must have known about his appearance in the sea. Why didn't they send fighter planes to intercept him? Coupled with the subtle attitudes of these Japanese people, Jia Yan became more and more strange the more he thought about it. Whatever. The Japanese country is not a place worthy of attention to me. I have to return to the Huaxia kingdom now. The affairs of the Japanese country from now on have nothing to do with me. When Jia Yan thought of this, he immediately no longer threatened the ordinary people of the Japanese country at his feet. The wing muscles twisted and flew towards the sky. Xiao xiao. The sound of wind caused by the flying giant mosquito monster is very violent. The momentum is amazing. The Japanese people watched helplessly as the giant mosquito monster flew away. They all seemed to be exhausted and sat on the ground covered in sweat, looking at each other in silence. I don't care what these people think, just talk about Jia Yan, the big mosquito flying up. Jia Yan flew in the sky, and the scenery behind him quickly receded like a tide. He didn't know if it was the biological instinctive senses that made him feel uneasy, as if something had happened. This kind of thing is inherently mysterious. Jia Yan may just get some information from the expressions of the Japanese people. It's just to make him feel bad. In short, this feeling made Jia Yan not very comfortable and wanted to return to China as soon as possible. In the Huaxia kingdom, the only people Jia Yan pays attention to are his family. And in China, it is also a place he is familiar with, for Jia Yan. China is still my hometown. Now that everything is over, I naturally want to return to China. The flying speed of the giant mosquito. Keep it at around 400 kilometers. This speed is twice as fast as when he went to Japan. It was supposed to be an 8-hour flight. Now it only takes 4 hours. This is not just as simple as doubling the time. 8 hours could have been considered a long trip, but now it was a 4-hour flight, even though the distance was the same. But it feels completely different. In 4 hours, you can make a day trip. In addition, Jia Yan is now in good physical condition, so even if he has to go back and forth twice a day, it will not be very difficult. If he wants to arrive quickly, he can directly use the sonic endurance flight method. Half an hour is 500 to 600 kilometers. After that, take a short rest and hurry up. Maybe it only takes less than 2 hours to reach China from Japan. Of course, that kind of flying method is too tiring and puts too much burden on the body. Now is not the time to use that kind of flying method. Jia Yan's flying speed increased again. He is flying at an altitude of 2,000 meters. This place is not only suitable for flying, but the scenery is also very good. He can see good scenery at any time with his compound eyes. Not long after, the scenery behind him became more and more distant, until the Japanese island gradually disappeared from the horizon, and Jia Yan felt a little relieved. It seems that Japan will no longer send fighter planes to intercept him. This trip to Japan not only achieved the goal of killing the mercenaries who threatened the family, but also rescued the two killers, which is a return of their favor. Of course, the bigger benefit is that I got this blue mutation. It has improved my strength to the point where I can't even guess it now. Jia Yan was summarizing the results of his trip. Generally speaking, the purpose of his trip was relatively satisfactory. Although it was a bit regretful that he did not see the Japanese artifacts, you can't always pursue perfection in everything, right? The giant mosquito flies through the air, gliding in an extremely silent manner. Only when it needs to flap its wings will a faint sound be heard. The scenery in the ocean will become a bit boring if you see it too much. The endless sea water made the big mosquitoes feel visual fatigue and relaxed a little while flying. But at such a high speed, the natural result of relaxing is also a big problem. The moment of relaxation caused Jia Yan to fly in the wrong direction. When Jia Yan realized something was wrong, he adjusted the direction and spent half an hour longer. Only when he saw an island did he realize how wrong he was. The big island in front of him should have appeared on the left side of his sight in his original route. But when he saw it now, it appeared on the right side of his sight, which showed that Jia Yan had made quite a circle and went directly under the island. Fortunately, I didn't get too lost in the journey. The name of this island is Daewon Island. Because he was at a very high altitude, he could see Daewon Island from a distance this time. Although Jia Yan also knew that based on his current body size, he might have been detected by the surveillance radar of Daewon Island, but he was still unwilling to just fly over the island. Find bookstore. After all, it's better to cause less trouble. When he saw Daewon Island in the distance, Jia Yan's body swayed slightly, and the big mosquito in mid-air turned slightly to avoid the island. Whistling by. I don't know if Daewon Island saw his figure. Anyway, when Jia Yan flew over the island, he didn't see any interception force. After passing Daewon Island, a vast continent appeared in front of us. On this continent, there is his motherland before rebirth, China. I have been trying to use the Shuangpan input method for typing for the past 2 days. Not long after I learned it, I made all kinds of mistakes and got into trouble, so I updated it at night. I will wait until my typing speed improves to see if I can explode, but I am familiar with the Shuangpan input method. It will take at least a month, and everyone can look forward to Bulletin U's explosion. There will be another chapter later. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 178. For genuine subscription, please go to the starting point to subscribe, thank you. Jia Yan's flying speed increased slightly. Whether he can return to this Chinese country or not, actually doesn't make much difference to him. He is just used to this country and his parents are here, so it is normal for him to come back. Jia Yan's plan was to find a sparsely populated place in China and then temporarily take root there. He felt that his mutation this time could not be adjusted to his body in just a few days. Although his body was stronger at this time, there were still some places that did not achieve the full effect of the mutation, and it would take a certain amount of time to warm up and heal. Repair. After all, his current body is no longer the little mosquito he used to be. Although the mutation time is not short, it is nearly a week, but in this week, it is impossible to completely transform the current huge body into another appearance. He still needs some time to fully digest the effects of this mutation. That's why I gave up the idea of continuing to explore that god object in Japan. Because even if he finds it, he will even get a chance to mutate next time, but at this time his body has just completed the mutation, and it is impossible to undergo the next mutation, so it is better to wait until next time. So Jia Yan decided to return to China, cultivate for a period of time, and wait until he had fully digested the entire process of this mutation before he thought about continuing to increase his strength. The huge land in front of you quickly enlarges in your sight. Jia Yan's compound eyes flashed. As early as he was about to approach the Chinese land, he directly lowered his flying altitude. Most military radars have a height problem. As long as the height is lowered to a certain level, the radar search can be avoided, allowing him to return to the Chinese land without anyone noticing. Jia Yan was a little nervous, wondering if China would have any mysterious radar technology that could detect his figure. After all, his current body is not too small. If there is such a high-tech radar, it is still possible to find traces of him. Good thing this flight remains unexplored. Jia Yanfei returned to the land of China after a week-long absence. It was still afternoon at this time. As the Huaxia region in the south, the weather at the end of October was quite hot, and the sun above our heads was shining brightly. This makes Jia Yan, a big mosquito who likes hot environments, feel extremely comfortable. The soil from my hometown still smells good. Jia Yan was bathed in the fragrant smell of this earth. And bathed in the sunshine with a comfortable temperature, they flew into the coastal areas of China. Parts of the southeastern coastal areas of China have always been prosperous places in history. Even in modern times, this situation has not changed. Jia Yan's flying figure. After hovering at low altitude for a while, we entered a jungle. He had to wait until night before taking action. After all, afternoon was the time when human activity was high. Going out at this time will definitely increase the risk of being noticed by humans. It was not far from where Jia Yan was hiding. There is a small village near the sea. Because this small village is close to the coast, every household is considered relatively wealthy. However, in this wealthy little village, a strong scream suddenly sounded. It was accompanied by this scream. It was a strong explosion sound. Red light flashes. Boom boom boom. The house flew into the sky, debris exploded, and cracked bricks sputtered everywhere. The scream suddenly stopped. Then, a metal machine that was not too big, moved its four legs, slowly walked out from behind the ruined house, its four legs trembling. This is a village that has been rarely inhabited for a long time. Although it may have been a wealthy place before, it is obviously a bit dilapidated at this time. The small single-family houses in the village have become ruins one by one, and the various license plates the car was even more dilapidated and parked everywhere, which was a pity. This metal machine is very similar to the one Jia Yan saw in the Mount Fuji cave. It's just that the metal monster under Mount Fuji has the kind of eyes that glow slightly red, but this one doesn't. That's the difference. Got it? There are no other metal monsters around this metal monster. At this time, after checking the vicinity for a while, the monster seemed to find that there was no shadow of other creatures. It immediately moved on all fours and walked towards the outside of the village. And Jia Yan, who was not too far away from here, seemed to have made great progress in the antenna ears on the top of his head after the mutation. At this time, he heard a distant explosion and raised his head slightly alertly. After waiting for a long time and hearing no other sounds, he knelt down again in confusion. It's not even the Chinese New Year yet, and someone is setting off such large firecrackers. It's really a Chinese characteristic. The big mosquito is ready to take a good rest. After all, he has just completed the mutation and has been flying for such a long time. For him now, rest is more important. So Jia Yan fell into sleep little by little amid the occasional explosions that reached his ears. He never thought that the sound was not a firecracker, but a real explosion. I haven't had a dream for a long time. Although Jia Yan is a mosquito that can sleep, he is always in a tense and dangerous situation, so his sleep time is really good, and mosquitoes don't actually need it. A sleeping creature, so Jia Yan has gotten used to it since he hasn't had a good rest for so long. Now that he has become so powerful, wouldn't he be treating himself badly if he doesn't take this opportunity to take a good rest? The sun is shining, the grass and trees are fragrant, and the soil has a slight aroma. This is a good weather to rest. Jia Yan quickly fell asleep. The very distant explosion sound is still ringing continuously. Just like other countries in the world, the Kingdom of China also fell into panic and killing. As early as the so-called metal monster crisis broke out in the Japanese country, a group of metal monsters from the underground also spread out from the underground world in Tumen City, which is located on the northern border of China. When they see humans and any living beings, they will strangle them. That kind of red laser-like weapon, almost every time it bombs, humans will be killed or injured in the bombing. Moreover, the defensive capabilities of this monster are too exaggerated. Most of the weapons used by the army have no effect on them. Although research has now shown that this monster also has weaknesses, but this weakness is known in actual combat. It's the same as not knowing. So now China still has no way to deal with these monsters. Not only China, but the entire world is helpless. The powerful defense of this monster, coupled with the super powerful laser-like weapon above its head, this is the most powerful combination of spear and shield. Their individual combat effectiveness is extremely strong, and they are not the kind that gather together to act. It is not known whether this kind of monster has tactical literacy. After gathering in one place for a period of time, they will disperse and attack and fight separately. The Chinese army had tried a few days ago to use these monsters to gather together and use powerful weapons to attack them. However, this idea really doesn't work. Because of the uniqueness of metal monsters, they rarely gather in a small place with more than 1,000 characters. They are almost in groups of 3 or 5. Such combat power is enough to compete with a 100-man combat team from China, without the slightest bit of firepower. Not weaker than the underdog. And if a small team encounters a strong enemy, these metal monsters will call other metal monsters over in a contact method that humans cannot yet decipher, so human combat teams cannot follow them in one place. The metal monsters fight for too long, otherwise, countless metal monsters will pile up until all the soldiers are drowned. The largest battle in China happened 2 days ago. At that time, more than 3,000 metal monsters broke through the ground from underneath a well-known natural cave attraction, and massacred the tourists above the attraction. At this time, it happened that a Chinese army rushing to support the northern front line passed through this area. As a result, the fully equipped soldiers got off the train one by one. A group consisting of 5,000 soldiers and more than 3,000 metal monsters. The Monster Alliance launched an unprecedented super war. In this battle, the total force dispatched by the Chinese army reached more than 22,000 people, and a total of more than 100 fighter sorties were dispatched. The battle started during the day and continued until the next night. The final result was that the Chinese army of more than 22,000 people was completely defeated. After artillery bombardment and flying bombs, only more than 300 of the 3,000 metal monsters were eliminated. In contrast, as for the Chinese army, more than 4,000 soldiers were directly killed or injured. Due to the impact of this war, 2 cities were destroyed. The casualties among the people were countless. The refugee wave has already formed. But compared to the refugees of previous dynasties, the refugees this time don't know where they are going. In this Earth world, countless metal monsters seem to appear in an instant. Find the book garden in the borders of China. According to incomplete statistics, there are 200,000 metal monsters emerging everywhere. 200,000, and it is a 200,000 monster with such powerful combat power. Officials and people who knew this figure had ugly expressions on their faces. According to the battle loss ratio of the largest battle, the 200,000 metal monster army would need at least 3 million Chinese troops to die in the war to completely eliminate them. Are there so many troops in the entire Huaxia kingdom? What's more, that battle was fought by the Chinese army, which was well equipped. The few troops dispatched can also be said to be the elite of the army. In the future, as the war continues, the elite soldiers will be exhausted and the weapons and equipment will decline. How should we fight then? What's more, in that battle, because the metal monsters were extremely concentrated, the lethality of the artillery fire was maximized, which had the effect of killing 300 animals. What if the metal monsters were all scattered? 2 updates completed. Please subscribe. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 179. The metal monsters are scattered, how difficult it is to deal with them. There is a real case here. That was once a unit was ordered to fight a team of metal monsters in the northern land. The number of this unit is only 500, but their unit organization is an artillery company. The amount of artillery fire it possesses is terrifying. This is a company that cannot find its main force in the war. After all, there has been no war in China for a long time. This means that although the troops often conduct exercises and training, in actual war situations, there will always be certain mistakes made while busy. This is inevitable. And this artillery company of 500 people immediately prepared for battle after discovering a team of about 100 metal monsters raging in a village in the north. Fortunately, the northern land has already carried out a large-scale evacuation of people, and the people in that village have already evacuated. This company is the Propelled Rocket Artillery Company, with a total of 6 extremely powerful 130mm self-propelled artillery. Artillery company, the attack method is naturally to use artillery. At the beginning of the encounter, the artillery company launched an artillery blocking attack against the 100 scattered metal monsters. However, the effect of this extremely powerful artillery fire on these small metal monsters is disappointing. This time, the metal monsters were in groups of 3 to 5. As a result, the 6 artillery pieces only caused damage to 3 metal monsters during the period when more than 100 metal monsters were attacked by artillery fire and impacted inside the company. Even these damaged metal monsters still have certain attack capabilities. However, the red light emitted by 100 metal monsters completely drowned the artillery company after 6 artillery launched 2 rounds of attacks. A battle of firepower versus firepower, but in the end, it was still the metal monster troops that won. It can even be said that they won a great victory. There is no suspense at all. Even in terms of firepower, it can't match the metal monster. Faced with such a huge gap in strength, the entire China, they all chose to huddle up and defend. Only guard a few important cities. Before there is no way to deal with the metal monster, you will never start a decisive battle with the metal monster easily. And under such circumstances, except for those places outside big cities, the miserable conditions suffered. You can imagine. The whole world is like this. In such an era where monsters are rampant, a giant mosquito monster appears. He seemed to be reborn from the bottom of the sea, and he worked tirelessly to return from Japan thousands of miles away. I don't know about this big mosquito. What changes will be made to the already rotten situation? It makes the current situation even more chaotic. Or get better. Nobody knows. But in this chaotic world, nothing seems strange anymore. Jia Yan is in the quieter forest near the sea. Took a little rest for a while. This sleep was more necessary for him. A night's sleep left him with fatigue accumulated from mutations, and a little sleepy from traveling continuously. All received comprehensive relief. Stay up until midnight. Feel refreshed and feel more powerful than ever before. Okay, this should be the most comfortable time for humans to sleep. I can leave. Jia Yan stood up. His slender 6 legs were like steel, supporting the ground one by one, causing the ground to sink slightly. Jia Yan's weight at this time must have reached about 100 kilograms. And this is because he is a flying creature. It is probably the instinct of biological evolution that controls his mutated weight. Otherwise, his weight of 100 kilograms will definitely increase. If you want to make this 100 kilograms weight fly, you must use more force to flap your wings. Buzz. The sound of flapping wings became louder and louder. Jia Yan's figure gradually increased, and the sound of his wings flapping gradually became louder, and the speed of this increase will also be faster. As long as the speed is increased to a certain level, the wings no longer need to be flapping. At that time, they can switch to gliding and fly effortlessly in the sky. But this flight is obviously not that easy to succeed. Just when Jia Yan was about to fly to high altitude, boom! A bright red light flew from mid-air not far from where Jia Yan was. The speed of this red light flying is absolutely extremely fast. And this red light has a very familiar feeling. It seemed like I had seen it somewhere before. It's those metal monsters. In the flash of lightning, Jia Yan seemed to immediately recall the memory of this red light from the memory fragments. This red light is particularly memorable to him. It was exactly the unique attack method of the monster from the bottom of Mount Fuji a few days ago. Jia Yan was so shocked that he was absolutely horrified. Think about it, something that you thought was thousands of kilometers away suddenly came to you, and attacked you in a sudden attack. Another person probably wouldn't be able to accept it for a while. But after all, he is not an ordinary mosquito, not even an ordinary human being. Now Jia Yan definitely belongs to the kind of big mosquito who has experienced many battles. At this time, he has a strong intuition about fighting. This intuition can easily make him instinctively attack without even having time to react in his head. Face some crises. Just when the red light burst out, the light in the big mosquito's eyes flashed suddenly. At this moment, his movements were faster than his head. The body flying in mid-air suddenly made an emergency stop. Then he made an emergency appearance in the sky toward the bottom. Smooth and flexible. The red light shooting from the ground was like a bolide shooting from the ground, but when Jia Yan had just made his dodge action, the bolide had already arrived in front of him. Aha! Jia Yan only saw a fiery red light passing by him. Then this fiery red object shot into the vast dark night sky, as if it could fly to the end of the universe. The next moment, Jia Yan's compound eyes finally returned to normal expression from the fear. He turned his head back and set his sights on the ground. The head held high seemed strange. This creature flying in the sky seemed to be a little different from the weak creatures he had seen before, a metal monster. The metal monster is observing the giant mosquito monster flying overhead. And Jia Yan above. The same compound eyes flickered slightly as they looked at the metal monster that suddenly appeared. This monster is really very similar to those metal monsters seen on Mount Fuji. There is also a hollow barrel on the top of his head. The barrel is flashing red light at this time. Obviously, it was this monster that emitted red light before. Why did he appear in this place? What's going on? Jia Yanfu looked at the monster with doubts in his heart. Could this monster be following him all the way from Mount Fuji? All the way to China? Wrong. This argument doesn't make sense. There was no reason for the metal monster to keep chasing him, Jia Yan didn't say, and the time couldn't be justified. If these monsters were capable of tracking him in the sea, why didn't they attack him when he mutated? Actually, Jia Yan even thinks that these guys are not so intelligent. So why did he appear here? Jia Yan at this time. My heart is like a raging storm. The scene he saw on the Japanese island before, and the scene that made him feel inexplicably uneasy, were now remembered by him. Jia Yan finally felt something was wrong. That is the people on the small island of Japan. It seems that planting has begun on that small island. They look like they plan to live there for a long time, not just for sightseeing. Jia Yan was a little surprised. Looking at it this way, could it be that the Japanese country did not actually eliminate those metal monsters from Mount Fuji? But were they attacked miserably? But how could this monster appear in China, thousands of kilometers away? It doesn't look like someone who traveled a long distance from Japan to this country. Could it be? Jia Yan thought of a not very good idea. Could it be that the Huaxia kingdom was attacked by these metal monsters like the Japanese kingdom? What Jia Yan guessed is indeed not far from the truth. This is the advantage that Big Mosquito has relied on to survive for so long, and it is also his extremely powerful point, that is, his reasoning and analysis ability is extremely strong. And it only takes 2 or 3 seconds to analyze so many things. Just when Jia Yan was still thinking about something, the metal monster below fired another fiery red light. Boom! The fire explodes. Only then did Jia Yan realize that the noises he heard while sleeping were not the sound of firecrackers at all, but the red light explosions of these metal monsters. Although there are so many thoughts in his mind, Jia Yan's speed is not slow at all. He continued to control his wings and made an evasive movement in the air. Once again, he easily dodged the metal monster's attack. It's my turn. The big mosquito paused slightly in the air and immediately activated its body shape. Sprint toward the bottom. Jia Yan only felt his body rushing like lightning. After the mutation, his speed has definitely been greatly enhanced. At this time, it fell from the sky like a bolt of lightning. Cut through the sky. In a few tenths of a second, Jia Yan stabbed forward with his compound eyes flashing faintly. Poof! The right front foot stabbed hard into the metal monster's body. The metal monster's metal armor, which can resist thermal weapons, cannot resist it at all. His ability to fight the army is nothing compared to the current big mosquito. Puff 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 puff. The big mosquito stirs with its front legs. The sharp knife-shaped horny, in the body of the metal monster, gouging it fiercely. Click, click, click. The sound of the sound was very unique, as if it was the strong and astringent feeling of metal clashing, rather than the exoskeletons of two monsters clashing. The sharpness of Jia Yan's knife-shaped horn is even more exaggerated. In an instant, the metal monster in front of him was completely dismembered. The armor of the metal monster that could withstand bullets seemed to have no effect at all and was cut into pieces. The metal monster's armor made of metal turned into pieces piece by piece and fell to the ground. I didn't have the chance to see what you monsters are like last time. Let me take a good look this time. Jia Yan was thinking fiercely in his heart while using the knife-shaped horn of his front foot to cut the metal monster in front of him that was gradually losing its resistance. Please subscribe to the official version. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 180. He wanted to know last time what the internal structure of this metal-looking monster was like. What Jia Yan didn't know was that just when he easily dealt with this metal monster, within 10 kilometers of the surrounding area, there were more than 100 metal monsters raging on the ground, and they seemed to have received some order at the first moment. Then, one by one, these monsters put down what they were doing and rushed towards where Jia Yan and the metal monster that attacked him were. Jia Yan on this side of the world had no idea that this metal monster, which had made no movement at all, actually sent messages to other metal monsters. He was just quickly dismantling the metal monster. And this metal monster, because of Jia Yan's sharp front feet, had no resistance at all and was broken into several pieces. Jia Yan's speed of decomposing this metal monster would definitely be very surprising if a human scientist studying this monster saw it. Because the body of this monster is very hard, but Jia Yan ignored this hardness and easily cut the monster's body open as if cutting ordinary plastic with a knife. If human scientists want to decompose this metal monster, they must use equipment. Even ordinary equipment cannot cut through such a hard monster body. They must use advanced cutting materials to be able to conduct cutting research on metal monsters. But Jia Yan did all this just by moving his front legs. If there were human scientists here, they would definitely be envious, jealous, and at the same time feel extremely afraid of the terrifying front legs of this giant mosquito monster. It is really sharp, and the power of the front feet is probably not that great, otherwise how could it be done so easily? Jia Yan is obviously very satisfied with the sharpness of his knife-shaped horn. Click, click, click. A pair of front legs divided the work, and the metal monster in front of him quickly turned into a pile of fragments. After carefully dismantling this metal monster the size of a puppy, Jia Yan's doubts grew bigger and bigger. Is this a machine or a living thing? This question has arisen since he saw this kind of metal monster. Jia Yan originally thought that he only needed to dissect a metal monster. We'll get the answer. But when he actually dissected a metal monster, he became even more confused. Obviously, the main body of this monster is made of metal, but his body has something like a heart. This thing is still beating slightly at this time, as if it is a real heart. Then here comes the problem. Is this machinery or life? Although I am a biology enthusiast, I am not a real biological researcher after all. This problem is too complicated for me. Jia Yan shook his head slightly. Put aside your desire to find out. The rest of this monster, apart from being a little tougher, doesn't seem so surprising. Could it be that his real secret lies in this heart? Jia Yan was very curious and used his front feet to flip the heart of the monster in front of him. It was still beating slightly. The feeling of simulated heart is very strong. Cut it, Not long after, Jia Yan continued to do it. Now that we have reached this point, we must continue. Extremely sharp knife-shaped horn. On the surface of the beating fiery red heart, he stabbed it. Poof. The slight sound surprised Jia Yan. This heart-like thing, the metal monster, was directly exposed to the air. It shouldn't be so weak. How could they defend themselves against attacks from the outside? Jia Yan expressed some surprise, but his speed of action would not slow down. Puff puff puff. There were constant cracking sounds inside the heart. Jia Yan discovered that in the short time he held it in his forefoot, the heart became crisper and easier to cut. Sure enough, he becomes more brittle after death. Jia Yan's compound eyes flashed. The whole heart was cut open in no time. A large number of things that looked like parts were scattered all over the floor. They seemed to be parts that were originally in the heart, but for some reason, they broke apart independently. But one of the pebbles, which emitted a faint green light, attracted Jia Yan's attention. This is. He weirdly used a knife-shaped horn to pick up the stone, which was only the size of an adult's finger. This pebble is actually attractive to me. Jia Yan picked up the pebble in his forefoot and immediately felt that this small pebble with a faint cyan light was actually attractive to him. You know, Jia Yan is no longer the little mosquito that could attract anything to him. But this small green pebble still attracted him, which immediately made Jia Yan interested. Haha, I haven't even thought about how to become stronger in the future, but I didn't expect you to show up to me. Jia Yan's compound eyes shone slightly as he looked at the small pebble that he had to be very careful to grasp with his front feet. It seems that this thing is the core structure of the metal monster. It has a relatively blue-gray color, but if you look closely, you can see through the blue-gray a hint of blue light inside. Could it be that this thing has something to do with the azure crystal? Jia Yan's heart moved slightly, and his mood became more solemn. He could vaguely feel that there seemed to be a certain connection behind all of this. It seemed that the process of his mutation was also related to these magical things. But do I need to worry about all this? No. It is precisely because of these things that I am what I am now. Without these things, how could I have grown from an ordinary mosquito to where I am now? Jia Yan's compound eyes flashed faintly, and then he became determined in his heart. Since this blue-gray pebble seems to have some effect on him, he will have to collect these things in the future. Although his instinct feels that this pebble does not have a great effect on him, at this time he has become so powerful. He estimates that even if he takes some purple-red liquid medicine and black liquid from the past, now these things are basically things that cannot make him have any instinctive reaction in front of him. But this blue-gray pebble is still good for him. It is obviously another opportunity for mutation. Thinking of this, Jia Yan's compound eyes glowed even brighter. Just when Jia Yan finished thinking about this. Then it's time to put the blue-gray pebbles into the laptop bag you carry with you. Whizzing. 2 red rays. Extremely eye-catching at this night. It cut through the night sky and shot straight in the direction of Jia Yan. Again, Jia Yan was slightly startled at first, and then became furious. We must deal with these 2 metal monsters that suddenly appeared. But just when he made this plan. Whizzing. 2 more rays of light. Through a long distance, shoot directly to Jia Yan's location. Needless to say, in that direction, 2 more metal monsters appeared. Jia Yan's movements paused slightly at this time. He was thinking. These monsters appear one by one, maybe they really have some contact information. After all, this thing is not a high-tech thing. If Jia Yan fights with them, he might get into a long battle. Although he is not afraid. But in the current situation, he didn't even understand what was going on. It's obviously not a wise thing to start a battle with a metal monster like this. Therefore, after the big mosquito's compound eyes flickered slightly. It was just a rapid flapping of the wings. Groan. The vibration of the wings reached an extremely high speed instantly. Poof. His body reacted almost as soon as a few red lights appeared, and then the moment the red light hit him, he unfolded his body and jumped into the sky. Boom boom boom. The 4 rays of light hit the ground where Jia Yan was in no particular order. A heat wave surged out from the ground and rose into the sky. It almost chased the mosquito's feet, and the flames almost burned his hind feet. But a slight difference makes a huge difference. These 4 red rays of light did not cause any damage to the big mosquito at all. Sure enough, there are quite a few armies of metal monsters behind them. The big mosquito flying in the sky looked behind these metal monsters, a light flashed in his compound eyes, and he simply no longer thought about attacking. There are so many metal monsters, not to mention whether he can withstand the attacks of so many metal monsters now. Just killing these metal monsters is enough for him to waste a lot of energy. He doesn't want to do this thankless task when it is not necessary. Even if the blue-gray pebbles in the metal monster's body will help him with his subsequent mutation, he has just completed a mutation now, and there is even a follow-up process that has not been completed, so his current need for mutation is not very strong. There are so many metal monsters, they won't run away, right? In that case, I'll leave first and figure out what's going on. Jia Yan was in the air, his wings fanning fiercely. Yin yin yin. Whistle, roar, roar. With the hurricane blowing crazily in his ears, Jia Yan's speed reached over 300 km per hour in an instant. After another second, the speed accelerated to 700 per hour. 2 seconds later, this instant acceleration process is still not over. Whistle, roar, roar. Speed exceeded 1000 per hour. It accelerates from 0 speed to over 1000 speeds in 3 seconds. This speed cannot be achieved by any manned vehicle except rockets. It's not that it can't be done, it's that very few people can withstand such acceleration and overload force. But the big mosquito did it easily. A few more shots of fiery red light flew up behind Jia Yan, but the distance was off by an unknown amount. The chasing metal monsters from behind continued to chase unwillingly, but how could their speed be comparable to the big mosquitoes flying in the sky? Not long after, the metal monsters behind him were thrown far out of sight. Hoo ho ho. The big mosquito gradually increased its flying height. Find bookstore. Looking at the scenery below, his eyes gradually became more solemn. The world on the ground seemed to him like scorched earth everywhere. Ruins of ruins were scattered randomly, and thick smoke was rising in some places. Is this, all caused by those metal monsters? Jia Yanfu had disbelief in his eyes. Could this be already, a war? A war between metal monsters and humans. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 181. Jia Yan flies in the sky. Below are the unsightly ruins of buildings. At this time, the big mosquito was completely confused. It seemed that he was the only one excluded from the changes in the world. In just 1 week, he became stronger in the deep sea. But Jia Yan never thought that in just 1 week, the world would change more than he did. This gave Jia Yan a very strange feeling, as if his own changes could not keep up with the changes in the world. But at this time, Jia Yan, after looking at the bottom for a period of time, felt a little movement in his heart. Now the villages and cities on this coast look like this, so what will my hometown look like? It won't become like this, right? Thinking of this, Jia Yan suddenly became nervous. If his hometown becomes like this, what about his family? Will something happen? Anyway, it's not far from my hometown. Let's go back and have a look. The wings of the big mosquito twisted, and then its huge wings flapped rapidly in the air. His speed involuntarily accelerated, making a certain amount of noise in the night sky. If anyone looked above their head, they would be surprised to find a huge creature flying past. His wingspan reaches more than 4 meters, and his 6 long legs cover him, reaching a coverage area of more than 10 meters. It can be said to be very terrifying. Jia Yan has indeed become stronger, and his becoming stronger this time is not just a small performance. At this time, he has not fully realized his true strength of becoming stronger, and what he is showing now is just the tip of the iceberg. The giant mosquito is still flying. The night high in the sky is dotted with stars. These stars are like those pearl agates, mysterious and tempting, very eye-catching. Precisely because it was a disaster day, the light pollution was not as strong. The moon and stars above our heads can be seen clearly. Jia Yan discovered that the night sky at this time was actually the most beautiful night sky he had ever seen. But the view of the night sky only attracted the big mosquitoes for a moment. Just let him give up watching. For big mosquitoes, his soul is still a human being. Although he has been reborn for so long now, he still maintains the wisdom and experience of a human being, and he also believes that family members in the human era are relatives. Therefore, at this time, the idea that the scenery will be better preserved without humans will not arise. Although for some life on Earth, humans are indeed the biggest threat. It is even the culprit of the annihilation of the race, but isn't this the survival of the fittest? The strong ones stay and the weak ones are eliminated. This law applies even to humans themselves. It is also applicable, after all, human beings are social creatures. There will be excellent people in society, and there will be bad ones. Then the good ones will leave their descendants, and the bad ones will be eliminated. Reproduce. And pass on your excellent genes. See, it's that simple. After all, humans are just a kind of living thing. But Jia Yan was different, he had thought about it. Although he is good enough, he basically cannot be considered any kind of creature. Want to pass on your genes? Let's find a female giant mosquito like him first and then talk about it. What's more, even if he found it, what would Jia Yan agree to do with a female mosquito? It's just hilarious. Ahem. I'm thinking too much. Jia Yan interrupted his thoughts. In fact, relying on Jia Yan's flying speed, it doesn't take much time for him to reach his hometown. After all, they are all from Fujian province, and this province is not big. For Jia Yan, his speed has long been beyond the reach of a province that can cause him confusion. During the flight, Jia Yan's worried mood gradually relaxed. After passing through those coastal cities where the war was more serious, the situation in other cities along the way was pretty good. It seems that the number of those metal monsters may not be large, or they may not have been attacking humans for a long time, so the war has not spread to the entire country. Spread to. However, the scenery along the way is not all good news. Perhaps the war near the coast has brought panic to these nearby cities, so the people in the cities below are a little confused. Fires appeared from time to time, and there were some screams. Apparently there were more thugs at this time. Countless tragic stories are happening. I hope my hometown city won't become such a mess. Jia Yan looked at the city below that was almost out of control and felt a little heavy. As long as there are human beings who see true love in times of trouble, there must be people who take advantage of the situation and take advantage of it. This kind of thing has not changed since ancient times. Jia Yan has no intention of going down and playing the role of a great hero. After all, he can no longer be considered a human being. If he goes down now, what he is waiting for is not a welcome, but fear and attack, right? Besides, he has no intention of being a hero. All he wants to do is protect his family. I don't care about the life or death of other people. For him now, a journey of more than 200 kilometers only takes about half an hour. Soon, Jia Yan crossed the entire Fujian province and arrived at the county-level city in the north of Fujian province, which is his hometown Tanchinj. It has only been about a week since the last time he returned here, but Jia Yan feels like a long time has passed. Tan City, bathed in the dark night, is a little different from the brightly lit city in Jia Yan's memory. The wings he spreads out are used for gliding flight. So I approached this small city silently at this time. 2,000 meters high in the sky, the giant mosquito spread its wings, covering a large area of the night sky. The full moon above the head has a faint light, which illuminates the entire body of the giant mosquito. If anyone looked at the sky above their heads at this time, they would definitely find this big mosquito monster. But the humans below are no longer the kind of humans who would make a fuss when seeing strange things. Monster. Nowadays, monsters are not something that catches the eye. There are monsters everywhere in the entire land of China. It is very easy to see monsters. As long as you are not afraid of death, you can see them at any time. So now Jia Yan not only doesn't have to be afraid of radar, but he doesn't even have to worry about being noticed by humans. Even if he was seen, it was just a sight. Humans would be surprised at most, but no one would think of taking a video. Then it was posted online to show off. That was originally Park Plaza. What's going on? There are many people setting up tents there. Hey, isn't this house still under construction? Why are there so many people gathering in this place? Fly all the way. Jia Yan found that his hometown city below was somewhat different from the city in his memory. Because of the metal monster. At this time, Tan City was no longer the big city that he was, with a slower pace. A place where everyone behaves kinder. Instead, he appears violent and commits crimes in the dark. It keeps happening. Jia Yan flew over the center of the city and soon reached the sky above his home. There was total darkness in this building. It's only around 9 o'clock in the evening. Why did you turn off the lights so early? Jia Yan remembered when he was at home. It's usually after 11 o'clock, and the family hasn't had a rest yet. There is no light so early. Is there something wrong? Thinking of the many crime incidents I have seen and heard before, Jia Yan couldn't help but feel nervous. The big mosquito's figure fell directly. Hoo ho ho. His huge figure cannot be concealed, but the night sky gives him a good protective color. At this time, few people will observe the weirdness in the sky. So Jia Yan was able to descend quickly, until he flew to the rooftop of his home again, then he gently flapped his wings and let his 6 feet stand on the concrete floor. Snap! The ground made a slight sound. But no one noticed the movement on the rooftop. Back here again. Jia Yan looked at the surrounding scenery. Compared to last time, his mood was no longer so surging. After all, he had already come back once, and a week was not enough for him to feel the long-lost feeling again. But compared to his somewhat irrational state last time, Jia Yan could look at his surroundings more rationally this time. For example, although the rooftop is still not covered with tiles, the surrounding protective walls have been painted a new white color. This may be the handiwork of Jia Yan's hard-working father. Jia Yan moved his front leg slightly. He hesitated whether he should go down and take a look. If something happened to his family, he wouldn't know. But at this moment, bursts of coughing came from below, making Jia Yan give up the idea. Jia Yan could tell that it was his father's voice. He remembered that his father Jia Sheng's legs and feet should not be healed yet because he was injured by those mercenaries. Now that his family is worried about his injury, it is normal for him to go to bed early. Jia Yan thought for a while and then crawled down again. This night, he planned to stay with his family like this. This was the first time since his rebirth that he was so close to his family. The feeling of home and family is very warm. Jia Yan's heart was filled with warmth. He knew that this night, he would no longer have confusion and worry in his heart, because he could spend it comfortably with his family by his side. But this feeling did not last long. Just when Jia Yan was thinking about sleeping again. Boom! Suddenly, there was a violent explosion not far from the outskirts of the city, which brought him back to his senses from the comfortable feeling. Over there is. Jia Yan raised his head, the distant fire reflected in his compound eyes. The place where the fire and explosion emitted was not very far away, only about 3 kilometers away from downtown Tianjin City. Jia Yan remembered that place. It was a tourism project under development in Tianjin. It seemed that a lot of money had been invested, but there were not many tourists in normal times. How could that place explode in the middle of the night? I hope it won't be anything bad. After all, if there is danger in that place, it may endanger this place. The light in Jia Yanfu's eyes flickered slightly, and then he shook his body and stood up from the concrete floor. Now that he is back, he must guard the safety of his family. The big mosquito spreads its wings. Trying not to make a sound, he flew into the sky.